Sorry about that. Okay, so welcome to Mac Attack, navigating the dynamic landscape of Mac malware. My name is Ferdous Saljooki. I also go by Sal. I'm a threat researcher here at Jamf Threat Labs. Work with Jaron Bradley, and really enjoy analyzing Mac malware and occasionally finding 0 days, reporting them to Apple. And we also use Apple's endpoint security API. Excellent talk, Brendan Dalton. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here from Toronto, Canada. Previously presented at conferences like Objective by the Sea. And today's presentation is really to give you an overview of all the different kinds of Mac malware we've seen. There's a ton from this year, even just in the first quarter of 2024, and last year as well. So I'll try and cover as much as I can. There's many more malware as well. So definitely feel free to look them up and read up on them as well. So just a quick recap of some of the Mac malware we've seen so far. There's been a ton of information stealers, backdoors, like spectral blur. We've seen a lot of pirated applications infected with malware, malware such as Rust Bucket, which we've attributed to Blue Neuroff. And then also supply chain attacks that we've also seen, such as 3CX and the Jump Cloud supply chain attack. I'll touch on those as well. So hopefully this presentation will give you an overview of some of the Mac malware we've seen. But before we get into that, I just wanted to touch on what some of the tools we use for your Mac malware analysis environment, and differences between like virtualization and running on Metal. So there's really two components to malware analysis. I like to think static analysis and dynamic analysis. In static analysis, you really all the things you typically do without executing the malware, things like running like strings. And then dynamic analysis typically involves using a debugger, actually executing the malware, seeing its behavior. You'd probably want to monitor like ES events and stuff like that. So these are just some of the tools. Sprite Tree, there's lots of really good tools from Patrick Wardle, Lulu, Block, and then for thinking of the free ones like Gidra and Hopper's pretty relatively cheap. So the difference between, we often get this question like, which VM should I use? The difference between virtualization, running on Metal, and really it comes down to preference. There are some benefits to each, and with virtualization, we typically use some tools like the Apple's virtualization framework and open source tools like VirtualBuddy, UTM, but there's some limitations. They don't offer snapshots, and you kind of need Mac OS 12.3 or later, limited to 2 VMs at a time. And then there's running on Metal, so just getting a dedicated Mac Mini to detonate malware and in an isolated environment. And we use like APFS snapshots to kind of, when we detonate malware, go have a snapshot, and then we can recover from that snapshot in recovery mode. Next, we have to collect samples, or where do we get these samples to actually do our analysis? And we often use like tools like or threat feeds like VirusTotal, but typically to download samples and stuff, you would have to pay for a subscription. So instead, I would highly recommend Patrick Wardle's Objective-C GitHub for malware. He does a really good job of keeping up to date with all the latest malware samples and uploading them. So definitely check that out, and that's a great place to start for doing malware analysis. So let's talk a little bit about Lazarus. Since a lot of the malware we see on Mac OS is often been attributed to either Lazarus or Blue Neuroff, for Lazarus is a North Korean state-sponsored APT group. They've been really active on Mac OS and really targeting financial data, corporate secrets, and many other financial assets. And we've seen many attacks from Lazarus. So they typically, their goal is to steal sensitive information from the system, whether it's financial data, corporate secrets, or other valuable data. And often they would move laterally within a system and perform and launch further attacks. So some of the most prolific attacks from Lazarus, the Sony Pictures attack, Also the WannaCry attack, where ransomware has been spread. These are some of the more well-known attacks from Lazarus. But for some of the earlier attacks from Lazarus, I want to touch on Operation Dream Job. This is a campaign we've seen from Lazarus where a lot of they would target victims with these decoy PDFs offering potential job opportunities in the crypto space. And they target cryptocurrency exchanges for fake job offers. And their goal is likely to, conduct espionage and steal crypto assets, and often targeting victims through social media, LinkedIn and Twitter and things like that. Here you can see some of the PDFs that would often be sent out to the victims. So how does this all exactly work? Well, we got for Operation Dream Job, there was a Coinbase lure that was actually a signed and notarized version of this Finder Fonts Updater application that would go out and write to the library fonts directory. And then it displayed this decoy PDF to the user, indicating that the application was truly necessary to view this potential job offer. And then behind the scenes, it would drop the Safari fonts agent, as well as an unknown third stage payload, which we weren't able to retrieve since the C2 was offline at the time of analysis. And then also crypto.com lures, really similar technique, where again, a spear phishing email, drop a first stage. In this case, it would actually create persistence in the form of a launch agent, right to the library Wi-Fi preferences directory, display this fake PDF, and then drop additional payloads, which was kind of unknown with the final payloads of that were. So also, it's important to touch on Blue Off, since a lot of the attacks we'll be covering, like Rust Bucket and Joker Spy, have been attributed to Blue Off. And Blue Off, I like to think of as like a subgroup of Lazarus, and they're primarily focused on going after financial assets and cryptocurrency exchanges and stealing crypto wallets in order to fund the North Korean regime. And their operations typically involve longer-term operations to infiltrate their targets, spending months within like a network before executing their final payloads. And we've seen sophisticated attacks on the SWIFT banking system in the past from Blue Off, and on numerous banks worldwide. I think the most notable one was the Bangladesh bank heist, where they attempted to steal millions and millions of dollars. So one of the first backdoors I want to kind of get into is Spectral Blur. This was discovered by Proofpoint, a good friend of mine's, Greg Lesnowick. And it's actually a very moderately capable backdoor that can upload, download files, run a shell, updates configuration, and execute commands issued from the C2. It communicates via sockets wrapped in RC4, and you could see some of the file paths that it writes to, often writing to the user shared directory, and writing to a file beginning with the period to kind of hide it in Finder. And it also invokes a function called xcrypt to encrypt and decrypt the malware's configuration and network traffic, sets up a pseudo terminal by making a call to POSIX OpenPT for a remote terminal session. And it's also actually been linked it's also been linked to candy corn malware. So the next malware I'm going to touch on is the Rust Bucket. It's a malware that we've discovered last year, and it actually has multiple components to it. It uses this fake lure for the internal PDF viewer application, and displaying these fake PDF documents that indicate that you need to use this PDF viewer application in order to view the contents of them. So this internal PDF viewer, when we came across it, it was quite interesting since it was unsigned. The name of the application, this internal PDF viewer, is not something we would typically see in a normal application. It was undetected on VirusTotal, and also compiled with script editor. So taking a closer look at this, you can see that this is this stage 1 the layout of this is actually an applet, and an applet is essentially a way to execute AppleScript. So this applet is a wrapper. It goes and invokes this main.scpt file that goes and runs this AppleScript payload. So interesting note to this is that this AppleScript payload wasn't actually compiled as run only, so you could simply open it in script editor and view the complete source of it. So this stage one would go on to curl and write a PDF to the user shared directory. Again, we've seen that many times with a lot of APT malware writing to this user shared directory, so it'd be a great detection to kind of monitor for. And then it unzips this, and also you could see the user agent. This is something that BlueNorOff uses a lot, these user agents with curl with a 1. We've seen that quite a bit. And then it displays, it just simply launches this internal PDF viewer application. So that was the stage one. And now the stage two is also an internal PDF viewer application. But this time it's a little bit different. It's not an applet, but instead it's a, you could see that the contents of this actual Mako internal PDF viewer Mako executable. And before I get into this a little bit further, you might be wondering at this point, okay, you said it's unsigned. How are they able to get code execution on the system? Well, they provide a PDF to simply get the user to override system controls, and by right-clicking open, Apple prompts you with this gatekeeper prompt to indicating that you're about to override system controls, and in this case, that's exactly what the victims would do. So the second stage is actually a PDF viewer application. It does actually function like a PDF viewer application, and in this case, the PDFs that were supplied to the victims would act as a key in order to launch the next stage of the attack. So this PDF would actually go and the internal PDF viewer would go into a specific offset within the PDF to de-XOR a URL that would go and communicate to retrieve the third stage. And this was inside of the constant section of the executable. There was a hard-coded XOR key, 100-byte XOR key. So we could use that to actually view the hidden component of the PDF. So, and then you'll see that it makes a connection to retrieve the third stage. We had some difficulty retrieving the third stage, and we just crafted a curl request, a post request with curl that met all the requirements in order to retrieve the third stage. Once we did, you could see that it was a Rust executable. That's hence why we decided to name it Rust Bucket. And it uses this WebT crate. And some of the functions you can see to do recon, it gets information about the installation, running processes, and things like that. It also has the capability to execute commands remotely, self-terminate, and many other recon capabilities. So I just wanted to kind of illustrate this, and so you can kind of get an idea of how that works. The victim would see this fake PDF. It's a one-page document, and it indicates you need to open this PDF in the internal PDF viewer application. And then once you do, you see that there's another alert as well, that there's like a Department of Justice PDF and safeguard viewer. We found a number of them, and some of them actually didn't go on to retrieve the next stage, and it was likely that there was attacks on the Windows side as well. So again, I will go and right-click open to override gatekeeper, and once this is launched, you could see that the internal PDF viewer application is running, but nothing actually malicious happens at this stage, and this is just a simple PDF viewer. And then when I actually load it in with the malicious PDF, we'll see that it will display a much larger PDF rather. And it also should eventually make a connection. We should see a prompt with Lulu that it makes a connection to the C2 to retrieve the next stage. And there it is. We had to kind of modify this since the attacker C2 was offline at the time of analysis. But yeah. So Joker Spy is also another malware that we've seen, and it's been attributed to Blue Naroff. It's spyware, and again, targeting a Japanese crypto exchange. Bitdefender as well as Elastic Security Labs did a really good write-up on this. And it executes this XCC Swift stager that goes and tries to mimic XProtect by using the identifier com.apple XProtect checked. And then if you just execute this in terminal, you could see what it goes and looks for, a number of TCC permissions. It looks to see if full disk access is applied or permissions are granted, screen recording and things like that. And Elastic observed that this XCC stager has been executed by 3 different processes, iTerm, IntelliJ, as well as Visual Studio Code. And it's likely that these has been backdoored plugins or third-party dependencies. This was go on to surveil the host, execute commands, exfiltrate data, delete files, upload files, and many other things like that. And it actually drops SwiftBelt, which is an open source red teaming tool for enumerating the system. You can see some of the commands for this, and definitely check out Elastic's write-up if you're interested in learning more about this spyware. We've also seen Rustore, and Rustore is a multi-stage malware that, again, goes after exfiltrating data, compromising the victim system, and it displays, again, a fake PDF for a potential job opportunity. And this is a common technique we've seen across various malware. And behind the scenes, it goes and executes a second stage and runs that in the background. It seems to impersonate Visual Studio Code updates, and it also we saw variants that leverage AppleScript to exfiltrate documents or sensitive files in the documents and desktop folder. It also persists with cron jobs, launch agents, and as well as persistence through modifying the ZSHRC file, as well as persistence via the doc. Pirated apps and Zuru malware. So this is a malware that Jam Threat Labs discovered, and also Patrick Wardle did a really good write-up on that as well. And we've seen various well-known applications that have been actually backdoored and modified to communicate with attacker infrastructure. And once detonated, this malware will go on to execute multiple payloads to secretly compromise the victim system. So this all happens because this application was been modified to load a dilib. So those of you that aren't familiar, dilib is a dynamic library similar to DLL on the Windows side that is executed at runtime. So anytime this is launched, it goes and loads this malicious dilib in. This drops 2 things. The Kepri backdoor is an open source backdoor. It has a lot of capabilities, and it goes and downloads also a persistent downloader. And if you took Jaren's class, you kind of know what that FS events D, it tries to mimic a daemon. It's hiding under, again, user shared, with the period at the beginning of the file name. And it creates persistence in the form of a launch agent. We see this a lot with a lot of malware, writing launch agents or launch daemons beginning with prefix with com.apple. And if you see that on your system as a launch agent or launch daemon, oftentimes is malware. And then it drops, and then it runs this unknown payload, which we weren't actually able to retrieve. You kind of get the theme by now that there's a lot of pirated applications out there. Backdoor Activator is another one that was written by Kaspersky. And malware will often try to, the code execution part of it is trying to, malware find creative ways to get code execution on the system. And I put an icon for gatekeeper there because Apple's done a pretty good job for like code signing and notarization. So to get it's easier to just simply get the user to override these system controls, and that's what the instructions in this DMG are indicating. So this is a multi-stage attack. Again, once the user detonates this activated app, it goes to download this Python downloader, and then a third stage Python backdoor that grabs OS information, list of directories inside the user's folder, list of installed application, external IP, the CPU type, so on and so forth. But what is the overall goal of this? For this one, Kaspersky was able to actually retrieve the final stage, and it's a backdoor that's able to replace the Exodus and Bitcoin crypto wallets, and this way, their attackers are able to steal the crypto assets the moment the crypto wallets are opened. And sorry, I didn't. In the previous slide, it actually prompts the user for their credentials in order to do that. We've seen the first variant of Lockbit ransomware targeting macOS, compiled for ARM, and it uses a hard-coded password of test. Patrick actually tweeted about this, and there's actually been no occurrences of Lockbit for macOS yet, to our knowledge, in the wild, and no victims claimed, no distribution methods known. But you could see that attackers are continuing to develop and make sure that their ransomware will also work on macOS. There's a few interesting notes for this one. There's some anti-debugging logic that invokes ptrace with the pt deny attached. So if it tries to load this in a debugger, it will actually terminate. So this is quite interesting. It also has some XOR strings. And if you just de-XOR the entire executable with this key 39, you could just see a bunch of the different strings. And then Lockbit, of course, appends the Lockbit extension. So Apple's done a pretty good job with preventing ransomware attacks on macOS with things like system integrity protection, and then also with TCC protections. So if an application tries to access files in the user's desktop, documents, or downloads folder, they would get prompted, and they need explicit user approval to do so. The next, going to cover a little bit of the 3CX supply chain attack. By now, you might have heard about this, but in March of 2023, Jam Threat Labs, along with various other vendors, observed a targeted attack dubbed Smooth Operator against 3CX, which is a soft phone application by 3CX. It's used by millions of users around the world, and nation-state threat actors targeted 3CX in a supply chain attack that compromised several builds of their application. And the way they did this by loading in this malicious dilib, you can see the infected versions of that were compromised. And ultimately, it would go and make a post request using a specially formatted cookie to retrieve a second stage called update agent. This second stage update agent would also go and collect information about the configuration that it's running on, extracting URL and account name values, and then making another post request to retrieve, or make another post request to send this to the attacker C2, and then simply terminate, and that's it. So you might be wondering, like, at this point, like, what was the point of all of that? And I think Patrick pointed that out on Twitter, that oftentimes in these supply chain attacks, the attackers can also swap the second stage for a full-featured implant, and also it would just send a lot of this to the C2 and log it. And this was very likely an early stage, a very early stage. And if this continued, we could have seen much more impact, I guess. Knock Knock is malware that was discovered by Proofpoint, attributed to APT42, Charming Kitten. It's an Iranian-sponsored cyber espionage group, leveraging a Ruzi VPN application. This fake Ruzi VPN, a file is being shared. The user gets this phishing email, or the victim, and then they indicate that you need to use this VPN application to retrieve the files. And this is how this attack chain worked. At a high level, when executing this Ruzi VPN application, it executes an AppleScript file, which curls down a file from the C2, and it leverages a lot of bash scripts, and these were dubbed Knock Knock, that established a backdoor in the system. And a lot of these bash scripts would grab a list of running processes, information about the system it's running, applications installed, and then establish persistence as well. Jump Cloud, we've also seen the Jump Cloud supply chain attack from DPRK, where this was initial access was gained by compromising compromising Jump Cloud and inserting malicious code into their commands framework. In at least one instance, the Mandiant indicated that there was a lightweight Ruby script that was executed via the Jump Cloud agent, and that retrieved a second stage payload. Some of the backdoor components of this Jump Cloud supply chain attack, you see full house stored, Stratosphere, which is a very modular backdoor to retrieve modules from the C2 and execute them, and also tie-dye. If you're interested in reading more about this, Mandiant did a really good write-up on the Jump Cloud supply chain attack. Malware, information stealers. We've been seeing a ton of information stealers like Atomic Stealer, Mac Stealer, Realist Stealer, Purelin, and also write-ups from Chris and Adam on Cuckoo. And really the goal for information stealers is to exfiltrate as much data from the system at one go and send it to the C2. And they often leverage AppleScript prompting the user for their password in order to dump the keychain, cookies, list of credit card information that's stored in browsers and things like that. One of the earlier iterations of information stealers was the Mac Stealer. This is actually being hosted on the dark web forum, Malware as a Service. About $100 a build could get Mac Stealer, and you could see it's kind of hard to see, but some of the capabilities that they're offering in order to extract files, certain extensions, and cookies and passwords. And there's just a simple prompt. And then we've seen Upticks did a good write-up on this Mac Stealer, and it communicated with the Telegram bot. And you could see from the attacker side some of the information that it would collect, including passwords, crypto wallets, and various other information. I will touch on one more. I think I'm running out of time. Purelin the Sandbox is a play-to-earn game that uses blockchain technology. And so one of the Sandbox employees' computers were compromised through a malware application. And then later, bad actors used the data to send phishing emails pretending to be from the Sandbox and giving access to this new unreleased game called Purelin. What was interesting about this was that in the phishing emails, it contained a special access code to download the game to specific worker and file, and that way they kind of knew who they were targeting. And then ultimately, the goal was still the same. In this case, going after crypto wallets and these various Chrome extensions. And there's a ton more of information stealers. And we've been seeing a surge of them on macOS. Really similar techniques across all of them. So we covered a number of different malware today, backdoors, APT malware. There's a lot to cover, and there's probably others that I missed. There's also candy corn, which I didn't get into. But yeah, I'll be around if anyone wants to talk malware, and thank you so much for attending.
Just, are the samples available anywhere?
Patrick's GitHub.
Okay.
The samples are.
They're all there?
Yeah, they should all be on.
Most
of them?
Double check after this.
Okay.
And if there's ever a sample you see that's not there, feel free to bug me. Usually sometimes I'll search.
Sounds good. Yeah.
How soon after you discover something do you post it to your collection, Patrick?
Right away.
Like right away, you're like, here you go.
He literally
Sharing.
literally does.
Okay. Did you want to throw
Usually,
in?
sorry, not to steal you.
No, go for it.
When I started doing malware analysis, it was really hard to get samples. The 80 companies didn't want to share, and I was like, rude. And so it's difficult to kind of learn and practice. And normally once the sample's kind of out and about, really having a copy of it for a security researcher, in my opinion, doesn't make the threat increase anymore.
Okay.
Because you're not going to have the backend command control server. You're not going to usually have the infection vector. You just have the binary that's on the system. So the risk reward for me is definitely skewed towards sharing it. Not everyone agrees with that, but that's my.
I agree with it.
Fair enough. Okay, ready?
That's fun. Sal, you mentioned a few of these threats, and it seemed like they were written in many different programming languages. And I'm wondering if you're focused on developing heuristics based on specific programming languages, or if you're focused specifically on endpoint security alerts from Apple.
Yeah, focusing specifically on endpoint security because like when we first I'll use Rust Bucket as an example since it's like one of my favorite and we've seen Rust Bucket developed in Rust initially, right, and a cross-platform language, and then more recently we've seen it like in Swift and AppleScript and many other languages. So they're just like it's not specific to language and stuff. And endpoint security is a great way to like monitor that behavior. Things like information stealers, you see like Brendan's talk on Apple's OSA script, prompting the user for like their password. That's something we see a lot. And it's like the techniques is what we really focus on. And, like that dialog box is not something that, real developers should be retrieving passwords in that form. So.
Thank you.
Here we go. Hey, I've heard like when you discover something that hasn't been discovered by any other security research, you get to like name them. I was curious, have you ever gotten to name like a sample?
Rust Bucket.
Rust Bucket. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sorry if I missed that.
No worries. No. Yeah, I don't know, pretty bad with names and stuff, but yeah, like at the time it was developed in Rust, so I like Rust Bucket.
That was a good one.
But yeah, there's like other vendors that kind of use the same name as well. It's like because we're the first to identify it, so it's like we see Swift Bucket and all these other different names, and it's kind of cool to see that vendors kind of use that same name. So.
Yeah, hey, thanks for your talk, first of all. A few years ago, there was a lot of Mac search monetization hijacking going on, particularly out of one country in the Middle East, which a lot of people don't talk about anymore. Do you just not see that, or have they just gone away and done other business from your perspective?
You mean like through like sponsored ads and stuff and things
No,
like
so
that?
like domain squatting on Google searches, and then Mac OS implants derivative of that for search order hijacking monetization, and their like persistence methods were surprisingly good for the search hijacking.
Yeah.
I think we know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we've seen we've seen some of that, but I think nothing comes to mind like for something recent. So
Any theories on what happened with that?
it's a great question.
They're just like ghosts now, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not like it's not like they were just like, hey, we're making $1 million a month in like pure profit or whatever. We're just going to pack up shop.
Yeah. Maybe detection got better. I'm not sure. Yeah.
What do you
Cool.
think?
I don't know. I mean, I think like once you figure out what Office Park they were coming out of, probably you could figure out their ASN, and Apple maybe revoked all their
Yeah.
certificates. It's a good cheat, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm speculating. I have no idea. But like, you just don't shut down that kind of business, especially with the posters or the pictures they're posting online.
Right.
So the big party scene. So